Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. And of course, we're talking about the election as President of the United States of Donald Trump. Now joining us to give us his views is Thomas Ferguson. Thomas is Emeritus Professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, a Senior Fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks for joining us, Thomas.
Hi there.
So first of all, I know you do a lot of analysis of polling and trends and things like that. We were just talking off camera. The only poll that really seemed to get this right was the LA Times USC poll, which weighted their poll for people that won't tell pollsters the truth, that a lot of people that were going to vote Trump didn't want to tell pollsters that were going to. To what extent did you see this coming?
Well, I have, unfortunately, like a lot of political candidates, a dual line for this. One is, the piece that you and I have talked about on camera several times, that Walter Dean Burnham and I wrote back in 2014, where we said that election showed that both parties were breaking up, that the elites of both parties were basically at odds with their mass base. And then we also said that we thought Hillary Clinton would have a lot of trouble putting together the old coalition of effectively Wall Street plus, if you'll allow me to speak quickly and directly for the sake of communication, identity politics wasn't going to wash, that they could not appeal to enough plain, ordinary American workers and lower income folks with that line.
Meaning vote for the first female president.
Yeah, we didn't think well, that's an appeal, but what they did was obviously a lot great. They basically paid little attention to labor issues, to income. I mean, all it was couched in code, and they spent a lot of time ducking the questions about economic growth and equity that Sanders talked about.
Well, I think she tried to more or less become a type of Sanders candidate, except most people wouldn't buy it. She just couldn't be. In fact, Biden once said it during the primary. She's just not authentic when she talks about economic inequality.
Look, everybody knew what you'd get from the Clintons. That was the equivalent of a deathbed conversion. Now it appears quite literally in political terms. No, that was never believable. Anyway, if you're asking me, so did I see it coming? Burnham and I think, really laid out what happened, and we did it 2 years ago. On the other hand, I myself thought, I was actually in England at the time of Brexit, and I remember the shock, and I thought people would mislead. I just underestimated it, or as George Bush would say, misunderestimated it. And, I thought she'd probably narrowly win. I was wrong. You can see this. I'm looking at exit polls this morning. They're really interesting to study. You can see, for example, in the white college-age women, that Hillary only got 6% more of those than Trump did, which is sort of unbelievable. Those big numbers you hear on the TV and see in articles about the size of the gender gap, they get those large numbers by including women of all kinds of other situations in there. So you're both getting race and class dropped in. In that sense, the Clintons perhaps believe their own Kool-Aid about the size of the gender gap. The pure gender gap clearly couldn't be that big. And it wasn't. And moreover, you can see a lot of funny things in the turnout if you pay attention. The best estimate I've seen of turnout last night was about 55%, which means it was overall down. On the other hand, when you look in specific places, it's pretty obvious that African-American turnouts were down. They were, for instance, down in Detroit, and by enough to cost Clinton the state. Similarly, it sure looks like white turnouts in Pennsylvania were up, and probably elsewhere. So in that sense, You had some shuffling and a net loss on turnout, and that looks to me to have advantaged Trump. But let me come to what I think, Paul, is really the heart of the matter. I think we really are at the end of the classical Democratic formula of the Clinton period, which was Wall Street plus identity politics. I think this is it. You're never going to be able to put that Humpty Dumpty back together again. They are going to actually have, if the Democrats want to win, they're going to actually have to make a strong appeal to working class Americans. Now, you know the problem this is going to create. There's a ton of money in the Democratic Party. It is not going to sit there and tolerate candidates like Sanders, they just really despised and hated. And overall, they don't like Elizabeth Warren either. So we're now going to have a very interesting situation where you've got a top-heavy party with cash at the top, and then you have no mass base at all, basically, or very little.
And now you have an influx into the Democratic Party of neocons and all kinds of right-wingers, overt Republican style, who couldn't stomach Trump, assumed Clinton would win. He ain't taking them back, and this is his Republican Party now. So a lot of these people are going to have to find their home in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, this is a tricky question. I basically agree with you. I think Trump won this victory by effectively mobilizing against the rest of the Republican Party. That's what he, as a billionaire, could do. It's a point I've made to you on camera and off a lot. Only a billionaire could have pulled this off in the party. And though now he has to deliver for these people out there. I mean, for, if you like, the heartland. And he's, then he has a few other supporters, the Peter Thiels, the Carl Icahns, John Paulsons of the world. And he's got this huge block of quite antagonistic Republican leaders to him, of whom Paul Ryan is surely one. And I want to see how this works out. Because basically, I think Trump's going to have to choose between trying to deliver for the average American and holding his political base that just won him this remarkable victory, and getting the support of the rest of the party. If he goes for the rest of the party, then very quickly he will hit the same rocks that hit the other, the rest of the political establishment in the Republican Party and the entire Democratic establishment. I mean, they actually have to deliver something for the population. And it's real clear when you study the exit polls, how the trade issue, but also personal finances, your view of the country, are you better off and all that, these were all really powerful factors.
Now, Trump as unable to actually promise and do any of this stuff from the Democratic Party, the Republicans, Trump cannot deliver on almost anything he said except, he can attack Latinos, he can attack Hispanics in America, he can start something aggressive in Syria and, quote unquote, crush ISIS. He's creating a foreign policy cabal around him, which is the far right of the Cheney kind of right, starting with his Vice President Pence. But domestically, the people that voted for him, their lives are not going to get better and in all likelihood are going to get worse. And it's only a matter of time till that becomes clear.
Well, careful, because I actually think the situation in the U.S. economy for the average person, as distinct for some relatively affluent person, is actually pretty desperate. And even a medium-sized increase in public spending without infrastructure, I suspect would do quite a lot for the economy.
But is he promising more spending other than on the military? He's promising a massive influx of money into the military.
Well, with Trump, we're back to the old Groucho Marx line, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I've got others. He said different things at different times, but my best, if you're asking me, I may not quite read this the same way you do, and I could be wrong, but I think you will see an infrastructure program. I suspect that's going to happen, and it's clear that they may take a different view as to the importance of keeping the dollar high, and they may be willing to do something to push it down. That is to say, by not, for instance, jawboning the Fed to keep it up or something like that. We'll have to see how this works out. This is going to be an extremely interesting situation. I share the view that it's unstable. I don't think its failure is written in stone yet.
Well, we'll see. I just think if you look at who his allies are, and on the economic side, the economic thinking, it's all about keep wages low. I mean, he can talk whatever he wants during the election campaign, but you can't pray at the altar of high profits trickle down and then say you also think wages are going to go up, because we know those are two contradictory propositions.
Take my point, Paul, that the level of spending here, the deficiency in aggregate demand, even though Stanley Fischer and other people are walking around saying we're near full employment, we're not. And I think there is room for some fiscal expansion, and I suspect that that will help the average person and get some of these, more extended measures of the labor market down. I wouldn't underplay this. That's just my caution, and we can all come back in 2 months or 3 months or even longer and see whether I was right. But I don't regard this as a clear doomed failure until they lose the courage to break with some of their new friends.
Well, we'll see. If the gossip of who's going to be running the cabinet, who our cabinet members are going to be, and who's running this government, it seems to me that Trump is going to run around smiling at people, and it's going to be the hardcore right that's going to run the government. In fact, apparently even talking about the possibility of Sarah Palin in the cabinet.
I wouldn't be surprised to find her somewhere in a cabinet. Cabinets are not that big a deal anymore. You want to watch the National Economic Council, the Council on Economic Advisors, and obviously the Secretary of the Treasury job, which does seem somehow by some miracle to be slated for yet another Wall Street person. Look, let's probably the best thing to do on this one is adjourn for the time being, and let's see what happens. We can talk some more sometime.
Okay, well, I'm sure we will. Thanks very much for joining us, Tom.
Thanks, Paul.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.